Last year, Baseball America ranked the New York Mets farm system 16th among the 30 teams in baseball. This year, they're 5th? What led to the massive jump? Is the Mets farm system now actually one of the best in the game? We're going to dive into that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, Baseball America every year comes out with their top farm systems in the game. The New York Mets very rarely have a top farm system. 2018, they were 27th. 2019, they were 19th. Remember, that was when Pete Alonso was about to debut. I think Jeff McNeil had already done enough to graduate at that point, but I'm trying to figure who else would have been in the mix there. Andres Gimenez and others, I assume. Regardless, 19th. They broke the top 20. It was great because then they fell back down to 25th in 2020, 23rd in 2021. 2022, they were 16th. All of a sudden, the New York Mets break the top 5 farm systems in all of baseball. You got the Orioles who have, I'm looking at it right now, Grayson Rodriguez, of course. They have, is Hall still considered a prospect? Gunnar Henderson, part of this as well, guys that will be debuting. The Diamondbacks, you have Corbin Carroll, Gabriel Moreno, Jordan Lawler, Drew Jones. So a ton of prospects, some of which will be graduating. The Dodgers are always great. The Guardians always have a really solid farm system, particularly because of their pitching. The New York Mets in the top 5? Shocking. That puts the Mets ahead of teams like the Rays, the Nationals, who made that trade to acquire Juan Soto, the Reds with Elly De La Cruz, the Cardinals always have a good farm. Red Sox cracked the top 10, a little surprise on that. You go down the line here, the Yankees are 15th on this list, and you keep going. Let's find the Braves. You got the Phillies at 19th, you got the Marlins at 20th. Where are the Braves? They're 30th. The Atlanta Braves, the worst farm system in baseball. Look at their last 5 years and what coincides with this winning. 2018, they're number 1. 2019, they're 4. 2020, they're 4. 2021, they're 5. 2022, they're 22. And now at 30th, granted, they had the best, most cost-controlled young roster in the game. So I think they're fine with their farm, not supplementing it. But looking at the little blurb that Baseball America has written about the Mets to explain this jump, they say the system's top 3 prospects, Francisco Alvarez, MPB veteran Kodai Senga, and Brett Baty, will impact the big leagues this season. Let's stop right there. Kodai Senga. That is the big escalator in this. That is one of those little kind of quirks in the system, that he's considered a prospect because he's a rookie who hasn't debuted yet, but he's a veteran that came over and was signed to a major league contract that, unless he's pitching on rehab, will never be a minor leaguer. Okay, so that is the big difference here, where the Mets, probably you remove Senga, slide down this list a couple of notches, but there might still be a top 10 farm. And considering where they were at 16 last year and where they were at 25 a couple of years ago, it's still a market improvement. And it's not only Senga, it's Alvarez, it's Baty, and then they also discuss, they say, those 3 will impact the big leagues this year, while top draft picks Kevin Parada, Jett Williams, and Blade Tidwell, 3 of the guys they got last year, provide depth and upside to supplement the up-the-middle talents of Alex Ramirez in center and Ronny Mauricio at shortstop. So you look at that list, and that's essentially, going through the top 10 prospects in the Mets system right now. yes, it is a lot hinging on three guys we expect to see, and Senga is a big part of that. And then, of course, you have Brett Baty, who could be the starting third baseman by May, if not opening day. If the Mets want to get super aggressive. You got Alvarez, who knows by June or July, he could be your starting catcher. And you even have a Mark Vientos, who could be up at the big league level as soon as opening day as well. All of those guys will graduate. Kodai Senga will graduate. And naturally, when your MLB team gets better young talent on the roster that is now no longer considered prospects like the Braves, all of a sudden you're going to slide back down these rankings. So there might be a natural slide, but the fact that Baseball America is this high on the guys the Mets just drafted in Parada and Williams and Tidwell, and the fact that they've been able to develop some international players like Ramirez and Mauricio, it is a good sign moving forward. And the Mets have so much depth at the upper levels of their minor leagues, particularly when it comes to their position players right now, that you can really see that supplementing this roster in a pretty significant way where, next season, even if the Mets are looking at a free agent crop that outside of Shohei Ohtani, who they will be squarely in on, it falls off a cliff. It's Matt Chapman. There's not a lot else because Devers and Machado just signed extensions amongst others. You look at the possibility of having an established Baty and an established Alvarez, the guys that we've talked about. And then you have Ronny Mauricio, who just hit his third home run over 400 feet in the last, whatever it's been, 4 or 5 days here. He has 7 at-bats, 3 home runs in spring training, and you start to dream about what he could mean to this team while also still having Vientos and having guys like Parada and Ramirez who aren't going to be up this year, but if everything breaks right, could be pushing for midseason promotions, earliest in 2024, if not being ready to come up and contribute in 2025. So the Mets have a lot of players that could filter into this core here moving forward that can go around the guys that are locked up in Nimmo and McNeil and hopefully Alonso and of course Lindor, where you feel pretty confident that even if the Mets don't sign a big fish free agent when it comes to position players, they might be okay with what they got. And that's what I want to get into next. The bats really carry this system, and I want to really examine how Baseball America views those bats in relation to the top 30 as they've released that as well. So I'll get into some of their write-ups on these players in just a minute. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point in the NBA season has passed. The All-Star break has come and gone. We're now in that stretch run leading up to the playoffs, which makes now the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because once you're there, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers to three-pointers drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. I have my eyes on MLB futures right now actually as well. And look, we're talking about prospects in a farm system today. Kodai Senga is a prospect as he has a chance to win the Rookie of the Year this year, and it is plus 750 for him to do so. I would grab that if I was you. Also, don't miss the chance to get that no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. When we look at the Mets' top 10 prospects ranked by Baseball America, you go to the first 8, and 7 of them are position players. The other is Kodai Senga. Number 1, Francisco Alvarez. Number 2, Senga. Number 3, Baty. 4, Kevin Parada. 5, Alex Ramirez. 6, Jett Williams. 7, Mark Vientos. 8, Ronny Mauricio. And the top 10 is rounded out by Blade Tidwell and Calvin Ziegler. I'm going to dive into the pitchers a little bit more in the next segment because you see them really spaced out throughout the end of this top 30. But at the front end, very position player heavy. Francisco Alvarez, number 1, no surprise there. I'm still waiting to release my own personal Locked On Mets top 10 prospects, and I don't know if I will have Alvarez number 1. I'm still waiting to see on that one. Obviously, that's the popular choice, and maybe I'm just trying to be different. But, I look at the report on him, and here's what I see. The future. Here's what Baseball America says. The Mets have long been enamored of Alvarez's work ethic, composure, and competitive makeup. He has the it factor to become a star on baseball's biggest stage. Alvarez has reached the summit of his climb in pro ball, and he is poised to hit in the middle of the Mets order for a long time. It just might require a bit more time in AAA to shore up his hitting approach, to gain more rest behind the plate. After the season, it talks about his surgery on Alvarez's ankle, but he's expected to spend a lot of time with the big league club. When they grade him out, it's 50 on hitting, and this is on the 20-80 scale. So 80 is as good as it gets. 50 is right in the middle, slightly above average, right? It's basically like he's a good contact bat, right? Power's great, 70, speed 30, fielding 45, arm 50. So they are looking at Francisco Alvarez, and they're saying, we think he can be a near average defensive catcher, as they're right in here. And they say that he can be about an average hitter who can be better than that if he has better swing decisions and more zone contact. There's no doubt about his pop. It's a question of how good of a hitter is he going to be. So that's interesting. I think when you're grading on the scale of catchers, he's going to be above average. And when it comes to his defense, if he can be near average, you're going to bank on the upside of what he can bring with his slug to put him number one, especially at that position. But Brett Baty at number 3 is a guy that there's really not a lot that they complain about here. They discuss his improved play defensively at third base, has a plus arm that'll play there. His range, they're not as high on, but they believe he can hang there or move out to left field to get his bat in the lineup. They have his hit tool at 60, his power at 55, his speed at 45, his fielding at 45, and his arm at 60. So at third base, with that arm being a plus, there's a chance that there could be at least an average, if not a slightly above average defender there, and that's obviously not as much of a taxing position, but the hit tool of a 60, I know he doesn't have 70 grade power like Alvarez, but I just project out what Baty could be in the floor of Brett Baty, and I'm pretty damn confident he's going to be a good hitter. So it's interesting that everyone's consensus Alvarez, and I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to be at, so you have to wait for a future episode. Kevin Parada being ahead of Alex Ramirez, being ahead of Ronny Mauricio and Mark Vientos, that shows you the type of polished college bat the Mets drafted here, and that is part of why this farm system improved greatly. As much as you can be high on Alvarez, you also have to think about a future where both of these guys are at the big league level, and I honestly think if you look at Toronto, you look at what the Braves are doing right now with Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud, having two catchers that can split time, ease the wear and tear on the position, and take some time at DH, it's not a bad strategy the Mets could follow in a couple of years if Parada turns out to be the real deal, not to mention the fact he's a great trade chip as well. Alex Ramirez at 5, he's the most athletic prospect in this system. The question is he going to put it together? He has maybe outside of Ronny Mauricio kind of like the largest variance in the outcomes that we could see here, where he can be unbelievable or he could fall out of the good graces and not actually end up being the type of player we expect him to become. But they have him in the top 5. You go to Jett Williams, a guy they just drafted. Again, he's so new into the system that they call, the risk level extreme on him, which is, where they're at with Alex Ramirez. It's at a high risk level because he has shown a little bit more. But that's just the variance you're going to see in a prospect this young, just debuting. The thing about Jett Williams is you have a gritty gamer type who has a chance to be a pretty damn good second baseman, I think, is probably his ultimate home. But with Jeff McNeil, you never know. You don't really worry about McNeil and Williams because we have no idea what position Jeff McNeil will be playing or where he'll be at in his career by the time Williams is ready. But the fact that Baseball America sees the upside in Williams and puts him ahead of more established prospects like Mark Vientos and Ronny Mauricio, it just shows you that ceiling that you have to dream on, and that's why he's graded out so high. They have his hitting tool at a 60, his power at a 40, which power can develop across your minor league career, the speed at a 60, fielding and arm both at a 50. These are all tools he could sharpen, and Jett Williams could one day be the best prospect in this farm system. Mark Vientos, they're saying first base. They grade his power at 55, which is interesting because they view his chase and don't believe that he is going to be able to tap into his raw power enough because they don't think his approach is good enough, which is interesting. But then again, if he is just facing lefties, there's a chance he can thrive, and that's a role we could see him serving this season. His actually best graded tool is his arm, yet they view him as a first baseman, so not really a place where he can take advantage of that arm, but he is so kind of slow-footed they don't think he can hang at third base or in the outfield. So you kind of just waste the arm, which is maybe his best defensive tool, but he doesn't really have a defensive home anyway, and they have the hit tool at a 40, so they aren't really viewing that contact for Vientos as something where he'll excel at the big league level. Ronny Mauricio, who is the superstar of all superstars right now when it comes to the Mets, he has a 60 grade power, so they view his power better than Mark Vientos. His hit tool at a 40, they put him in the same line as each other. The arm at a 60, fielding 55, speed 40. I think it was interesting that they say this about Ronny Mauricio. This is in their scouting report. They say his glove could play average at shortstop, perhaps plus at third. His plus arm would also fit in a corner outfield spot if needed, though he has not appeared at the position other than a shortstop as a pro. When it comes to the future section, they say with a low on base, a high slugging profile, he would fit as a bottom of the third order hitter whose position value helps keep him in the lineup. So what they're viewing him as is a guy that is going to get on base at a 300 clip, which is what he's done in the minor leagues. It's actually been a little bit worse than that. Hit a ton of home runs, strike out a bunch, maybe not walk very much at all. All of the risks that we've been discussing with Mauricio, can he shed that notion, have a great season, and prove some of these evaluators wrong? I think is to be seen. But the defense at third base is something interesting where you wonder if maybe it's Baty in left because Ronny Mauricio can actually be a better plus defender there as a former shortstop. And in 2024, you're looking at a team that has Baty in left, Mauricio at third. You still have Lindor and McNeil up the middle with Alonso. You got Nimmo and Marte with Alvarez behind the dish. You don't have to potentially go out and get anything this offseason if all of those prospects end up having good years and establish themselves. Now that's asking a ton, but you really never know what could happen and how we can look at things come season's end. Sometimes you can have that run of success like the Braves just had where every single guy you graduate ends up being awesome, and we'll have to wait to see how these guys fare when they get legitimate run at the big league level. But it's clear that position players are carrying the Mets farm to this ranking, that and the inclusion of Kodai Senga. Pitching, the Mets do not have a ton of in the top part of their 30 from Baseball America, but the deeper you get, the more arms you find. So that's what I want to do next. I want to just go through some of the names that Baseball America likes when it comes to Mets pitchers, because we really haven't seen the debut of a lot of top pitching prospects that can be successful lately, other than the surprise of Tyler McGill in 2021, and then David Peterson in 2020 as a former first-round pick coming up and turning into a quality MLB starter. So we're going to get to the pitchers just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. When we review the top 30 prospects ranked by Baseball America and the Mets farm, you go for a 9 to 12, and it's all pitchers. So, again, 1 through 8, there's Senga and 7 position players. Then it's Blade Tidwell, Calvin Ziegler, Dominic Hamill, Mike Vassell, and then you get a shortstop, Jesus Baez. Then you go back, pitcher. Joel Diaz, Matt Allan, Jordani Ventura, Leonardo Ovelas, Jose Budo, Luis Rodriguez, Junior Santos. Then you get some position players, and there is more pitchers down at the bottom here. Christian Scott at 26. I missed Javier Atencio at 25. And then Zach Green, who they picked up in the Rule 5 draft, could be part of the bullpen this year, closes out the top 30. The most interesting name on this list is the dropping of Matt Allan, which we were expecting, and we see him fall now to 15, right above a guy like Jose Budo, who their ceiling they're projecting, according to Baseball America, as a swingman. Now, Jose Budo could be a swingman for this team this year. That is how close he is. He did have success in AAA. If he gets off to a good start and the Mets need some depth, he's on the 40, and he could serve a role this year. And who knows what Budo could be? You never know. Some of these guys who are projected to be swingman turn into nice fifth starters. But, he's the guy this year I think you can most expect to see outside of course, Kodai. Blade Tidwell is the guy to dream about the most now at 9. First round pick, or was he first round or second round? He might have been second round last year. Let me go down to Tidwell. Second round pick by the Mets, 52nd overall, but they signed him over slot at $1.85 million. He was good in St. Lucie. They have his fastball grading out as a 60, his slider at a 60. So those are the two pitch mix that you look at and you say, even if he ends up having a reliever risk, he could be dynamic in that type of a role with those two pitches. But he's got a curveball and a changeup he's got to work on. He's got to work on his control. He's 6'4". He's going to get an opportunity this year to thrive, likely in high A, I think. I don't know if they're going to start him there or do the whole, we'll throw him in St. Lucie after an extended spring for a short little stint, and then boom, he's great for 3 starts. We bump him up to high A and then potentially double A if everything breaks right for him. But he's the guy to really look at. Ziegler's another guy they're extremely high on because he has the ability to spin the ball with the best of them and strike out a lot of hitters. Hamill's the guy that put up the results last year, who can pound the strike zone. If I'm not mistaken, did I catch a glimpse of Hamill? I might not have caught a glimpse of Hamill on Sunday myself, but maybe I saw him pitch in the inter-squad game or something. But he did look good the last time I saw him pitch in one of these spring outings. They're all kind of blended together now. He could top out at 95. I like what he brings, and you look at what Baseball America says. They talk about him developing his changeup, saying it's a usable third pitch for him now. He has a curveball, they say, that has shape but lacks power. They discuss, the command that he has of particularly the fastball, which is why it grades out as high as it does, and the slider that they like. Dominic Hamill could be a guy. Could he be a top flight frontline starter? Maybe not. But a back-end starter, that is a real possibility for Dominic Hamill, for a guy that, they drafted 81st overall. What is that, a third-round pick? I think it's a third-round pick. Regardless of what round he was drafted, it really doesn't matter. Dominic Hamill's a guy that I think could shoot up the system this year, and I don't know if he'd necessarily make an impact with the depth the Mets have already created. But next year, Dominic Hamill could be in that mix. Mike Vassell is another guy that had a lot of success last year. I don't know how high his ceiling is. Again, look at what they say. They say ultimately probably a 5th starter or a quality reliever, but you never know. Guy that they're pretty high on. And then it goes all the way down until 15, where you see a Matt Allan, who they put right in here. This is some scary stuff. They said this is the future on Matt Allan in this section on their top 30. Allan has experienced ups and downs of pro ball, but what he hasn't experienced is a full season. They'll have to wait until at least 2024. A study conducted by the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine found that 77% of UCL revision surgery patients ended up returning to play. So 23% didn't. And then he goes with roughly half returning to previous form. If you're telling me it's now a coin flip on Matt Allan being who he used to be, it would explain why he's no longer a top 10 prospect and he drops all the way down to 15 on this list. It's unfortunate. Hopefully he can be part of that 50%, or I guess the 50% of the 77% that actually make it back at all, that finds a way to succeed. But unfortunately, the odds are suddenly stacked against him. Regardless, though, the Mets have some talent that they're building. They're trying to help develop these pitchers better and better with all the driveline guys they're bringing in. So you could see this farm system continue to grow, even with the debuts of Baty and Alvarez and Vientos and Senga and those guys falling off of this list if they fully graduate. For now, though, the Mets wanted to win now and win into the future by paying big in free agency and building out a farm without trading from it when it comes to their top prospects. Early returns are a success for this Mets team. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition. Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, where you can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day to bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.